Hi, everybody. My name is Jonathan Corrado. I'm the Director of Policy at the Korea Society and a proud member of the Friends of Korea, or FOK, as all the cool kids are calling it. It is my sincere pleasure to serve as your Master of Ceremony for the 2020 FOK annual meeting. For the very first time, we have stepped into the virtual realm for this year's annual meeting. And while this does mean that, unfortunately, we can't meet over a table of delicious Korean food, I'm particularly remiss about that, it does mean a boost in the number of people we've traditionally been able to gather. I'd also like to point out that we're joined today by distinguished guests from South Korean consulates all across the country, so a warm welcome to them as well. I think you'll agree that it's an uplifting occasion anytime we're able to gather with people who share our appreciation for the importance of the U.S.-Korea relationship and all its dynamism and its many facets. In anticipation of this meeting of the Friends of Korea, I've been thinking a little bit about the word friendship. It's a term we usually use to describe a warm relationship between two people. What can friendship possibly mean to describe a relationship between two countries? I thought about it for a while, and I think it's actually pretty simple. It comes down to people. And this organization and the people who energize it serve as a stark reminder that the bilateral relationship has evolved way beyond its origin as a security alliance. It cannot be reduced to a mere transactional relationship. It has evolved into a robust, enduring network of partnerships, binding two peoples who not only share values, but who also harbor a strong affection for one another. We break bread and we eat kimchi together, and we've come to understand one another and feel jung for one another, a term that I know nobody in this meeting needs any definition for. To celebrate this, we've got a great program for you today with a most impressive cast of speakers. We'll hear our keynote speech from General Vincent Brooks, who will address perspectives on the U.S.-ROK alliance. We'll also hear from Ambassador Kathleen Stevens, who provides us with 3 post-election thoughts on the Korean-U.S. alliance. Additionally, we'll announce the winner of the 2020 Kevin O'Donnell Distinguished Friends of Korea Award. This very special award is a lasting tribute to the extraordinary contributions made by Kevin O'Donnell, U.S. Peace Corps first country director in Korea and the 4th director of the Peace Corps. So let's get started. I'm now pleased to turn the screen over to Jerry Kurzik, President of Friends of Korea. Welcome, Jerry.
Thanks, Jonathan. I really appreciate your acting as MC tonight. 여러분, 안녕하십니까? 건강하시죠? 주말인데도 참석해 주셔서 감사합니다. Welcome, everyone, on this wonderful weekend. As Jonathan has told you, we'll have a great program for you today. Our program is titled Perspectives, Past, Present, and Future. We believe that the viewpoints you'll hear tonight will not only captivate your attention, but also stimulate you to learn more about Korea and American relations. So please enjoy. Back to you, Jonathan.
Thank you, Jerry. It's now my pleasure to welcome Tom Byrne. Tom is an FOK board director and president and CEO of the Korea Society. Tom will introduce and moderate a discussion with General Vincent Brooks. Before coming to the Society, Tom was a Moody's Investor Services Senior Vice President, Regional Manager, Spokesperson, and Director of Analysis for the Sovereign Risk Group in the Asia Pacific and Middle East regions. Perhaps most relevant for the purpose of our discussion today, Tom served in South Korea for 3 years as a Peace Corps volunteer. Before we start with this moderated discussion, I want to let you know that we want to hear from you. So starting now, if you'd like to ask a question to General Vincent Brooks, you could type your question in the YouTube chat box. We'll try to get to a few of those after the moderated discussion. So quick word of advice on that. Keep your questions question-like, and that'll make it easier for us to convey them forward. And if you want to list your name and affiliation, you could do that as well. And now turn the screen over to Tom Byrne for his discussion with General Vincent Brooks. Tom?
Well, thanks, Jonathan, and also thanks, Jerry, for running a very efficient meeting. It's my honor to introduce General Brooks. General Vincent Brooks has had a distinguished career during his 38 years as a commissioned officer. I first met General Brooks while on Korea Society development trips to Seoul when he served from April 2016 to November 2018 as the 4-star general in command of all U.S. forces in Korea, the UN Command, and the ROK U.S. Combined Forces Command, comprising over 650,000 Koreans and Americans under arms. General Brooks has had numerous tours of duty with fighting units and had served in Germany during the Cold War, in Kosovo, in Baghdad as second in command of the multinational division that stabilized the Iraqi capital city and province during what is now called the Surge. He also commanded all U.S. Army forces in the Middle East and Central Asia as the commanding general of 3rd United States Army / U.S. Army Central, continuously deployed to Kuwait, Qatar, Afghanistan, Bahrain, Jordan, and the United Arab Emirates. He subsequently commanded all U.S. Army forces in the Indo-Pacific Asia region as the commanding general of U.S. Army Pacific USA RPAC or USARPAC, something like that. General Brooks graduated from the United States Military Academy at West Point in 1980, where he also distinguished himself as the first African American to lead the 4,000 cadets as a brigade commander or first captain, in a class that was the first to include women in the graduating class. He retired from active duty on the first day of 2019 and now serves on several public and nonprofit boards of directors and as a thought leader as a fellow at several distinguished academic centers. So welcome to the Friends of Korea meeting, General Brooks. And I'll kick off with the big overall question. What is your perspective on the U.S.-ROK alliance?
Well, Tom, thank you very much for the introduction. And 여러분 안녕하십니까? 저는 Vincent Brooks. 한국 이름은 박유정입니다. 반갑습니다. Nice to see everybody. So it's good to be with you tonight. I thank the Friends of Korea for the opportunity to talk to you during your annual meeting. And given that you are friends of Korea, you are friends of mine. And I especially want to thank Tom Byrne for the invitation. And of course, I want to send a shout out to my good friend, Ambassador Kathy Stevens. And I look forward to hearing her remarks. I want to just share a few thoughts for a few minutes, and then we'll go into some interaction. As I think about the challenges that face the Korea-U.S. alliance, to me, it's all about approaches. And so I'll very quickly run through three approaches. First is the approach to the alliance. How do the two countries operate in alliance with one another? Then I'll talk about the alliance approach to North Korea, to the DPRK. And then finally, I'll talk about the alliance approach to the region. And I think that this is these 3 points are full of challenge and opportunity, and we'll see which way it goes. So first, the alliance approach within itself, how the two countries approach one another. I do believe that we have experienced and are experiencing a period of rising nationalism in both the Republic of Korea and the United States, and certainly other countries around the world as well. But appropriate to this alliance, as the two countries think more about their self-interest, they fundamentally subordinate the collective interest. And I believe that is anathema to alliance. The alliance system requires the opposite to be true, that collective interest must ascend more often than not above self-interest. And so our first challenge is to stem the tide of rising nationalism between the two governments as they approach one another. The fruit of this rising nationalism is evident in some of the tension that we see in the alliance relationship right now. And remember, this is an old alliance. It has been together for a long time and through thick, thin, hard, soft, good and bad times. And I'm confident that it will endure beyond the present challenges. Nevertheless, there is some tension in the relationship. And it's manifested from, as I said, these dynamics that are currently manifesting politically. Things like the Special Measures Agreement. There is a need to see an increase, a steady increase, not just appropriate to rates of inflation, not just appropriate to growth of economies, but also to rising expectation. and certainly with the United States being a global power engaged in so many places around the world with many, many challenges, more must be expected of South Korea to attend to the matters on the Korean Peninsula, not alone, but in an alliance with a very heavy burden passing to them. And I do believe that South Korea carries a heavy burden already. And as I've stated publicly many times, South Korea is the exemplar among U.S. allies, especially on these matters that I'm speaking about: cost sharing, burden sharing, percentage of gross domestic product spent on defense, et cetera. But there's a need to increase it. Well, what has happened is the nationalistic approaches have halted reasonable dialogue. And so whether it's an unexplained multiple for what is being asked by the United States, or whether it's a specific number grudgingly offered by the Republic of Korea, yet rejected by the United States, these are hindrances to the alliance. And so it would be good to see that move forward in some way. The further manifestations of tension in the alliance are things like the support to the THAAD site at Sungju. It's a very important site, and it defends the Republic of Korea. It is a U.S. critical asset. There are only 7 batteries of such nature in the world in use. Some of them are involved in testing. Some are involved in defense around the world. Some are involved in the home base for contingencies. 2 of them are committed to the Indo-Pacific region. And that's by far and away the greatest percentage of commitment anywhere in the world. One of them, of course, on the Korean Peninsula. And the support to it has been lacking. The site should have been well developed by this point in time for a permanent condition. And it is still very expeditionary and temporary, and that is a problem. So this is another challenge in the alliance, perhaps derived from the same original issue of nationalist politics that is happening in both places. There's a reality of force levels. As the South Korean demographic shrinks, their military fundamentally must shrink also. And as they convert, as the South Koreans convert to a principally volunteer force, not a mandatory service structure as we have known for the longest period of time, that will put strains on the discipline of the force. And I can tell you that a volunteer force can be highly disciplined. We weren't sure about that in the late 1970s, but we're absolutely sure of it now. But the transition into that can be very challenging for a number of years. And so what should the force levels be? Can South Korea maintain a higher percentage of the force than they do now? And if so, how can that be if there's a reduction of the number of South Korean troops who are actually serving? Does that mean necessarily a reduction of the U.S. force? So these are questions that are out there. Of course, as I get to the alliance approach to DPRK, that anchors some of the discussion in many ways. There are certainly other topics to discuss about the alliance, like the transfer of operational control of forces in wartime. And I'll save that for questions if you want to go into it more deeply, but it is one of the open issues. The future of United Nations Command derived from that, and the perception of sovereignty being a critical consideration in all of the above that I just stated, particularly in the mind of South Korea. The alliance and its approach to DPRK is another very important topic. At the present time, I suspect, and I don't know this to be true, but I suspect that the South Korean government really wants to move forward rapidly with North Korea. North Korea is not interested in dancing at the present time. And so South Korea will continue to knock at the door and seek opportunities to create dialogue and to create an acceleration again, as we saw in 2018 and that we saw dissipate in 2019. But North Korea will choose its timing. And so South Korea's energies committed to that may be accelerated, especially in the next several months, given the election of former Vice President Joe Biden as the president-elect of the United States. That indicates a potential shift in strategy and policy as we move from one administration to the next. In the meantime, the Moon administration will be entering its election and campaign year, and I'll leave that to Ambassador Kathy Stevens, but North Korea knows that. And as a result, North Korea will try to time the degree of access. In the meantime, as they've demonstrated on their recent anniversary, they will continue to improve their armament, conventional armament, and potentially also nuclear armament, although we don't see it, but certainly, as we did see, intercontinental and intermediate range ballistic missiles, as well as the tactical missiles that can directly affect the Republic of Korea. Much improved. So North Korea is a modernizing military. It probably is a shrinking military also because they have demographic challenges too. But how does the alliance move toward peace on the Korean Peninsula? What is the pace of doing that? What does lockstep mean to the current administrations and to future administrations? And how does the alliance move through essentially the next year and a half of political transition within the alliance governments? And then finally, as we think about the alliance relative to the region, several things come into mind very quickly, most notably the alliance and its approach to China. Should there be an approach of pressure against China or balance with regard to relations with China? This is, I think, the heart of the matter that is creating friction right now, but will define the approach of the alliance as it goes into the future. China is maneuvering at the present time, and in my opinion, China only maneuvers when it believes it has advantage. It doesn't risk failure. So the fact that China is maneuvering in different places, applying different pressures, expanding foreign direct investment in a number of places, expecting behaviors to be a certain way from many countries in the region, including the Republic of Korea, that's a maneuver. China is on the move right now because they can. So what will that mean over the next several months? Does it mean a harder policy from the United States, a greater expectation of the Republic of Korea to put more pressure on China to stem this acceleration of the People's Republic of China throughout the region? We'll see. What does it mean for a new Biden administration? This idea of pressure versus balance is perhaps said in a different way, competition versus cooperation. And is there some harmony that can be achieved within those with a different approach to foreign policy by one or both of the two governments of the alliance? And what about Japan? As Japan contemplates the same maneuvers that I just addressed from China, Japan has expectations, and certainly of the United States first, but also as it looks to other countries around the region, especially democracies who have maritime and other military capabilities. Now, this forms into the Quad, the expectation of a free and open Indo-Pacific, where there's a high degree of alignment between the thinking of the Japanese government and the thinking of the current US government. Where does that leave the Republic of Korea, and where does it leave the alliance? Not to mention the social and political issues that still separate Japan from the Republic of Korea and North Korea for that matter, but especially the Republic of Korea. Can that move forward with the Suga administration now that Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga is now in position? Is that a new opportunity? Can that be done in 2021 during the Moon administration, or must it wait until the successor of President Moon, a year and 4 or 5 months into the administration of President Joseph Biden? These are the questions that face the alliance. It's the pace and the direction of engagement with the region. And finally, on that point, as I already alluded to, the Quad, other countries working together to operate for a free and open Indo-Pacific. India, Australia, Japan, the United States. And there is a great desire among all of them to have more countries participate, especially the Republic of Korea. But given the current approach that South Korea feels necessary to take, and I acknowledge that they have their reasons for doing so that perhaps have not been fully heard out, South Korea remains outside of the Quad structure and hasn't signed up for, if you will, the concept of a free and open Indo-Pacific and the strategies associated therewith. South Korea remains concentrated on the Korean Peninsula. And I think that's important. It ought to concentrate on the Korean Peninsula, but it must think larger about what opportunities await it and are demanded of it to preserve national security, to preserve economic security on the Korean Peninsula itself. So these are some of the things that I believe are facing us now. Change is afoot. We'll see which way we go, but the people who are on this call can play a big role in making sure that the alliance remains strong, that we do remain friends and better because I think we have more than a friendship. We have a kinship that's the result of so many years of sharing hardship together, overlapping each other. In the same way that Jonathan described when he was opening, we should be eating kimchi right now and enjoying different wonderful Korean cuisine. My mouth is watering just thinking about that. So we'll have to think about it in our minds and think about our love for that. Thank you all very much for listening, and I hope that gets us started on some questions.
Ladies and gentlemen, General Vincent Brooks, thank you so much. I'll use my clap emoji as a poor representation for all the applause that you could definitely expect to be receiving right now. So thank you so much. We're so grateful that you were able to join us today and willing to share your insights. We're now going to proceed to the rewarding of the O'Donnell Award. Service to the overarching goal of fostering cultural awareness and friendship between Americans and Koreans is key to the Friends of Korea mission. FOK annually recognizes individuals who have significantly contributed to this goal. At this time, please allow me to introduce Mr. Timothy O'Brien, FOK Board Director and Chair of the Kevin O'Donnell Award Committee. He'll talk about the award and announce our 2020 awardee. Over to you, Tim.
Thank you, Jonathan. Those of us in the early Peace Corps groups who had the privilege of knowing Kevin O'Donnell personally remember him so vividly. Many qualities stood out: his great energy, his unflagging optimism, his generosity, his sense of humor, his dedication to the Peace Corps ideal, and above all, his great love of Korea. His legacy was well known to all the following volunteers who served in Korea and is deeply embedded in the DNA of the Peace Corps in Korea and in all our hearts as we have returned from Korea. Every year, Friends of Korea remembers both the man and his ideals as we honor a distinguished friend of Korea with the Kevin O'Donnell Award in recognition of outstanding contribution to fostering cultural awareness and friendship among Americans and Koreans. This year, for the 6th Kevin O'Donnell Friend of Korea Award, from among a group of very worthy nominees in various fields, we have selected Dr. Kenneth Klein, the recently retired head of the East Asia Library at the University of Southern California. Among his many activities during more than 3 decades of service at the USC East Asia Library, Dr. Klein was instrumental in creating the USC Korean Heritage Library and making it a leading research library of its kind. He also played a key role in the creation of the USC Peace Corps Digital Archives, an invaluable treasure trove of photos, memorabilia, and other contributions by former volunteers in Korea. If you haven't visited that archive, I strongly recommend it. In addition to his leadership role at USC, Dr. Klein has been active in the promotion of cultural understanding between Americans and Koreans. In 1993, he served on the planning committee for a conference on new directions for the Korean American community in the aftermath of the unrest of April 1992 in Los Angeles. Dr. Klein also contributed to drafting a U.S. Senate resolution recognizing the contributions of Korean Americans. And he has advised the LA City Planning Department on important Asian American and Korean American monuments in the city and vicinity. This really only scratches the surface of the many professional, academic, and personal connections with Korea and Koreans that Dr. Klein has enjoyed over the years. We at FOK are not alone in our admiration for Dr. Klein. The Korean government has just announced that it will confer upon Dr. Klein the Order of Civil Merit, Dongbekjang, which is the 3rd highest civilian award given by Korea. Coincidentally, or perhaps I might say cosmically, I would note that Kevin O'Donnell also received the Dongbekjang at the conclusion of his service as the Director of Peace Corps in Korea. We are honored to have Dr. Klein here to say a few words as he accepts the award. Dr. Klein?
Thank you very much. I'm certainly very honored to receive this award. It comes as a bit of a surprise, but I can see my way clear to receiving it by regarding it as largely recognition and validation of a program that's really collective efforts on a number of people at the University of Southern California. When I first came to the university in 1983, within a year, the then university librarian decided that USC would become a home for one of the major Korean collections in the country. At the point that I arrived, we had a very minimal collection of Korean materials, mostly donated by either individuals or in some cases some publishers in Korea. And so this was a very bold decision, but it came with funding, which made all the difference. Part of his rationale and part of our success, came from support from the Korean community in Southern California, both through connections with potential supporters and donors in Korea, but also with connections to the historic families of Korean American community that at that point was and still is, I suppose, largely concentrated in Southern California. It was only 2 years after I had been hired myself that one of the major purposes for major reasons for our success in promoting the Korean collection came in the form of hiring Joy Kim, who was a member of the Friends Board. I'm sure you all are familiar with her. And certainly we would not have gone very far in building a collection and promoting all the programs that we have without her diligence and consistent work ethic and her ideas, of course. I was also fortunate that when we decided that we were going to collect materials on Korean American community, that it came at the very beginning of the development of digital archives, and we, through funding of a project to archive a certain number of those materials, we were able to get in the ground floor, and we built up an early momentum with the Korean American digital archive by getting the support of the digital library, or whatever the format that was at USC. Largely, when we digitized materials and handed it over to the person in charge of the library, it was posted up pretty much the next day, and so we were able to build quite a fair collection very quickly, and that made a big difference. This of course has slowed down, but we've expanded the range of our digital library. As Tim mentioned, we in the last few years have been developing the Peace Corps in Korea collection, digital collection, and several others. Los Angeles is well situated, not only because of the Korean community, but because of the interchange of businessmen and military and scholars and immigrants from between East Asia and Korea in particular. There are a lot of families that have held records, a lot of families and organizations that have held records, not knowing prior to the formation of our efforts what to do with them. The grandchildren or the children of grandchildren didn't know what the materials were, and so that gave us a big area for collections that powered a lot of the work that we've been able to give. And history is a lot like weather and pandemics in that it doesn't stop at borders. And if you're this is particularly true for American history, which has brought in people from all over the world, and they come with their different values and cultures and perspectives that they don't leave behind when they've moved to the United States. And so a large part of my aim in building the collections has been to show a connection between Korean Americans and Korean history, Korean culture, and where individuals come from, or where in general people have come, and what they have introduced into American culture and American society. And to the degree that this has been done, I feel whatever part I had in doing this, I'm happy to receive this award, and I thank you all very much for considering to give it to me. As I say, it's really an award, I think, for the Korean Heritage Library of the US. So on that basis, I'm happy to do it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kenneth Klein, for all the important work that you do, and congratulations for this award. We're now going to turn to our comments and remarks from Ambassador Kathleen Stevens. As you all know, Ambassador Stevens is all about promoting and advancing the U.S.-Korea relationship. She served as ambassador to the Republic of Korea from 2008 to 2011. She's currently the president and the CEO of the Korean Economic Institute of America, and also board chair for both the Korea Society and the Pacific Century Institute. Needless to say, she's a very busy person. Ambassador Stevens, known to her friends as Kathy, needs little introduction to Friends of Korea, as she started her career as a Peace Corps volunteer, teaching English in South Korea. Ambassador Stevens, thank you so much for joining us. We're so excited to hear your insights on the impact of the current U.S. election on the future of the alliance. I now turn the screen over to you.
Jonathan, thank you very much, and hello to everybody. Can you hear me all right? Jonathan, you're a great master of ceremonies. I appreciate all the work you do at the Korea Society. Jerry, great to see you, and thanks to Friends of Korea, which is just going from strength to strength. And General Brooks, Vince, thanks for, as always, carrying the heavy load here and really giving us a profound overview of, in particular, our security alliance, and leaving me to be, as I tend to be, especially when I'm the wrap-up speaker, and I know we have a hard stop of about 5:30, with a few more random thoughts. And I confess, I gave Jonathan and Jerry this title of 3 thoughts about the election, meaning the American election, a couple of months ago. So I'm still thinking about it. I'm sure you all are, but I'm gonna give it a go and try to relate it a bit to of course, to the work of Friends of Korea and to our commitment to our work with our allies in Korea. I guess before I have thoughts, I have a feeling. Maybe that's very Korean. I confess I have a feeling of relief. In April, mid-April, April 15th, South Korea held a National Assembly election, and there was a lot of worry about how that election would go. I've seen a lot of elections. That's one thing about being a lot of elections in Korea, a lot of elections in the United States, a lot of elections elsewhere. I always enjoy them. Sometimes they go well, sometimes they don't. I'm not talking about the results necessarily, but anyway, in April, amid much concern about how an election could be held in South Korea in the midst of a pandemic, in the midst of a rather polarized political environment, it was held. And you know what? They had higher turnout than they'd had in 2 decades. They moved forward with an election that clearly was seen as a mandate from the people of Korea expressing themselves. And, I feel a real sense of relief and even more than that, pride, that I feel like today, for all the challenges that are still before us, for all the polarization that we can talk about with our Korean friends, our shared problems and challenges, we had really high turnout, and we've got a result, and we've got a way to go forward. And I think that's a relief, I'd say not only as an American citizen, but as someone who believes that this is absolutely, obviously, fundamentally to the United States' ability to play its part in the world in the way that I hope is in the interest not only of our country, but of broader global interests, including those of our allies. So 3 thoughts. I have to be quick about this. Actually, my first thought is related to something that came up, which is leadership. And actually, I was thinking about presidential leadership and how that's perceived in Korea and in the United States. I actually was in Korea over the course of the last 45 years for 4 different American presidential elections. And I know some of you have been there for some of those elections too. And, it was always amazing to me. I mean, back in the 70s and all the way, my first election I saw in Korea was in Korea as it proceeded was in 1976 when Jimmy Carter was elected. And the most recent was 2016 when Donald Trump was elected. And I have to say that on both occasions in Korea, being in Korea in 76, obviously as a Peace Corps volunteer, where I remember I was eating my bowl of jjajangmyeon and a small Chungguk jeep in Chungcheon-namdo, actually in Chuncheon. I remember that in Cheonan. I remember this very well. And it came on the black and white TV that Carter had been elected. And the man at the next table turned to me and said to me in Korean, "We're doomed. 망했어요. Carter's going to pull out all the troops because he doesn't think that we're doing the right thing on human rights." Anyway, my point in all this is that 1, Koreans pay a lot of attention, as the world does. 2, relationships, I think, the presidents forge with their counterparts in Korea and their views on these issues are very important. But and of course, when President Trump came, he had a set of views about the alliance, which many of them very disconcerting to Koreans. But through it, we've kind of managed. We've managed the ups and downs, and I think we will again this time. And I think we are. And why are we doing it? I think part of it gets to my kind of, next point, or maybe it's related, which is institutions. I think General Brooks spoke very expertly and profoundly about the institution of the alliance, if you like, and the way that has put down deep roots over the years and also built relationships. Kenneth Klein, and congratulations on the award. I think you've talked about a different kind of institution, if you like. And again, things that didn't exist for those of us who were Peace Corps volunteers back in the day in the U.S.-Korea relationship alliance, of a Korean-American community, of ties of business, of the free trade agreement that we've implemented, the investment. All of those things have given the relationship, the alliance, a resilience and a sense of rootedness that allows it to weather the kind of political storms, if you like, as well as the geopolitical changes that we have experienced over the decades, and that indeed we are still in line to see a lot more of. So I think the institutionalization, the growth of that institution has accompanied the growing affection, the growth of the Korean American community, all of those things to give this relationship a lot of resilience. So my second point related to this is values. And the one value I want to highlight here is actually democracy. Those of us who were Peace Corps volunteers, since we are there's a certain number in this organization, all of us were in the Peace Corps, but sometime between 1966 and 1981. So Park Chung-hee's presidency, a time when there was tremendous economic growth in Korea, things were being delivered, but increasingly repressive authoritarian measures. I mean, whether you were there for the start of Yushin or and the decision not to carry out further elections, and Park Chung-hee didn't really like the results of the one that he did run against, Kim Dae-jung, to the assassination of the assassination of Park Chung-hee and the coup d'état by Chun Doo-hwan, the Gwangju incident which followed, and of course we have a member who's written a book about that. those were, we saw Korea when it was not a democracy, even though our alliance was, at least in word, and I think many American programs are based on the notion that there should be and could be a democratization. But what was the trade-off with the security of Korea? What was, how fast could it come? All those debates, which seem rather anachronistic, I'm sure, to some of our younger friends, whether they're Korean or American and can't remember a time when Korea was not democratic, make me an everyday appreciator of what Korea achieved. And it means I never take democracy for granted, certainly in Korea and certainly not in my own country. And I think the fact that we have these shared values of fundamental human rights, democracy, opportunities for our citizens is something that after this election, after what we've been through, we could appreciate even more deeply. And my third point is a new administration, President-elect Biden, is going to face enormous challenges. And Koreans, I'm sure a lot of you have Korean friends, or maybe some here with us, and a question they often ask me, and I'm sure certain many of us, is, is Mr. Biden really going to pay attention to what's going on in Korea, especially in North Korea? And because they know that an American president is always distracted by many things. And of course, we've got enormous domestic issues to deal with as well. I think that the issue here is, one, President-elect Biden has made it a priority and says on every occasion when asked about foreign policy, he wants to strengthen work with allies. So my view is, and certainly what I would say to him if he asked me is, you will find no more willing partner and no more natural partner on many, many issues than the Republic of Korea. Now, General Brooks is absolutely right to point out that there are areas where there is sensitivity from Korea because of his own relationship with China and other equities. But the South Koreans are looking for American leadership, principled American leadership, and they're also looking to be listened to. So I think there's an enormous amount that we can do, much more that we can do with the Republic of Korea if we can find common cause where we share the values of freedom of information, but with appropriate safeguards. So in these areas that I am not very familiar with, whether it's cyber or the technology challenges we face, issues that do have to do with the kind of alternative view that, if you like, that China is putting forth, Korea is a natural ally. But we're going to have to listen. We're going to have to work with them. I think we've learned to do that on the military side in many ways, but I think there's enormous space to do it not only there, but on a whole range of global issues, climate change, energy, and so on, that is going to really make the relationship even more robust and important going forward. And I know many of us who have seen the work of KOICA, and Friends of Korea and the reunions always visit KOICA, see that even though South Korea at the kind of government, well, this is the government level, but at a sort of a strategic level, have some hesitation about overly joining or being seen to join institutions that may be seen as containing or surrounding China. They have their new Southern strategy. They have their own interest in really trying to diversify their supply chains and trying to use their soft power. And they have tremendous soft power now, and it's not just BTS, but it's a lot of things. In Vietnam, in Cambodia, in the Philippines, in Indonesia, and all these strategically, in India, where I've seen it with my own eyes as well, and work in ways that are very complementary, I think, to the values, the strategic goals that we share. So those are my thoughts. They're a little disorganized, but it's a big day. And since everyone uses a little bit of Korean, I know that in the Alliance, and General Brooks is well familiar with this, as well as in Peace Corps, one of the first things that we all learned to say is 같이 갑시다, let's all go together. And the first place I learned was 타방에 같이 갑시다. When I said that when I went as ambassador, people said ambassador. There's no longer any tabang in Korea. But I'm going to change it to say, 같이 also means values. And I think, yes, we need to go together. But we need to go together on the basis of shared values. So 같이 바탕으로 같이 갑시다.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Stevens, and what a demonstration of your impressive Korean skills. Your language abilities are getting good when you're cracking jokes. Thank you for sharing your thoughts and for your feelings. Even though my camera was off, I found myself nodding and smiling a lot during your remarks. Your important points about resilience, shared values, and upcoming challenges bring clarity and perspective for us in the unique current moment that we find ourselves in today. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
In just a minute, I'm going to turn the screen back to Nancy Kelly, who will share with you the value of joining Friends of Korea, if you are not already members, and if you are, the value of re-upping as a lifetime member. She's going to highlight the FOK's Giving Back initiative, which is now in its 8th year. But before I sign off and transition to Nancy, I want to let you know what an honor it's been for me to serve as your MC tonight. I'm very humbled for this opportunity to be able to play some small role in tonight's festivities. I also want to give a shout out to a couple people who have been working very hard behind the scenes to make sure that tonight's operation ran smoothly. Ekaterina Mojaeva, FOK Board Director and Events and Communications Officer in the East Asian Studies Department at Stanford University, and Peter Stumke, IT Director at the Korea Society, are a big reason we're able to come to you this year. So thank you so much to both of them. I now turn the screen over to Nancy Kelly.
Thank you, Jonathan. Can you hear me?
Good.
And I want to thank you for your wonderful service as the MC for tonight's program. I hope everyone who's on tonight has enjoyed the program and that you've been inspired to get involved with FOK. And that's why I'm here. I'm here to tell you that there's more than one path to getting involved. Get on our mailing list, although I suspect if you've signed up for this meeting, you are on our mailing list. But if you're not sure, you can go to our website, friendsofkorea.net, and there's a contact us button, and just fill out the form and we will get it. You can join if you're not a member. Dues are quite reasonable, $25 a year. We have a student rate. We encourage students to join. The students are the future of the organization. If you want to sponsor a student, that would be wonderful. We do have a lifetime option, and that means that I will not bother you, nag you, whatever, for renewals. So I encourage you to consider that. Another way to get involved is to support our Giving Back initiative. As Jonathan mentioned, it's been going on for 8 years now. And we have, over that period of time, distributed more than $50,000 in grants and gifts to a variety of social service agencies, the NAM Center at the University of Michigan, et cetera. All of these gifts have been to support activities that are of interest and of value to the Korean American community, to our to colleagues in Korea, to Korean studies programs, etc. So if you make a donation and designate it for the Giving Back Foundation, Giving Back Initiative, 100% of your donation does go to that program. We don't take any administrative overhead. We are, I think, as Jerry mentioned, a completely volunteer organization, notwithstanding the $1 salary I get every year as COO. But everything, we do everything as volunteers. And so if you give to the Giving Back, it will get distributed to our philanthropic activities. Participate in our webinars. We've started this year. We've had 2 so far. We have several others in the planning stages. If you're interested in conducting a webinar, if there's something that a topic you would be interested in helping us put together a speaker group, or you have ideas, we would love to hear it. Again, go to our website, friendsofkorea.net, and click on the Contact Us button and fill out the form, and we will address it. And then hopefully next year, we would like to invite you to attend in person our annual meeting, which we hope will be in Austin, Texas. That was the plan for today. Unfortunately, the COVID situation intervened and we were unable to do an in-person meeting, but we are intending to go there next year. And so I would like at this point to introduce Ambassador An, who is the Consul General of the Republic of Korea in Houston. He came in April of this year, and he's had a distinguished career with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs with tours in Mauritania, Brunei, Indonesia, as well as serving as the ambassador to Turkmenistan. And so I'm delighted to turn the camera over to Ambassador An, who will tell us a little bit of what's in store next year in Texas. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Nancy Kelly, for your kind introduction. And good afternoon, everyone. It's a big pleasure for me to join you for the annual meeting of Friends of Korea. Having seen the program of today, first of all, I'd like to say that I agree with most overall Ambassador Kathy Stevens. The U.S. alliance, which goes back to 1954, has been very much resilient, and I'm sure it will continue to be so in the future. And I'd like to take this opportunity to express my strong support for Friends of Korea and its mission to promote awareness and friendship between the people of Republic of Korea and the United States. As you may know, the Korean Consulate General in Houston has been working closely with our distinguished Texas liaison Ambassador Greg Engel to co-sponsor this year's annual meeting in Texas, Austin, until the pandemic has turned the world upside down and also ruined our plans. And we are now looking to coordinate plans for co-sponsoring the annual meeting in Texas, in Austin next year, as Ms. Nancy Kelly has said, as well as continue our efforts to explore various programs and activities to promote Korean-American understanding and friendship. By next year, I think things will have changed. First of all, sometime in 2021, COVID-19 will be, I hope, brought under control. And with new administration in the United States firmly established, I think things will be more predictable. And I'm sure we'll be having more informed and useful discussions at the next annual meeting of Friends of Korea. And I look forward to it. And once again, thanks for inviting me. I hope to see you in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador An. Also, we extend our sincere appreciation to our speakers, General Brooks, Ambassador Stevens. Congratulations to Ken Klein, and thank you to the O'Donnell Award Committee, led by Tim O'Brien. Also, heartfelt appreciation to Tom Byrne and the staff at the Korea Society, particularly Linda Tobash, Peter Stumke, and Jonathan Corrado for his excellent work as Master of Ceremonies. Can we have a virtual applause for them, please? And finally, thanks to all of you for attending our meeting tonight. We couldn't do what we do without you. We look forward to seeing you all in Austin in 2021. Have a pleasant rest of the day and weekend. 감사합니다. 안녕히 계십시오.